Welcome to Leadership Beyond Burnout. I'm your host, Dr. Kimberly L. Wilson, and this is the show for emerging women leaders and seasoned women leaders to learn how to lead beyond burnout. Today, we have with us Dr. Jasmonae, and let me introduce her.
Hello, hello.
Hello, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here today. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself to your audience before we begin?
Yeah, I'm Dr. Jasmonae Joyriel. I am a licensed psychologist and owner of Ignite Anew. It's a consulting agency that hosts retreats and seminars for individuals and couples. And I specialize in complex trauma, sex and intimacy, and major life transitions. So I'm excited to be here.
Thank you. And I think when we think about the workplace, most people don't consider trauma. And
Yeah.
you and I both know for Black and women of color that trauma is often synonymous with the workplace. Can you
Yeah.
share how trauma may have sometimes shown up for you or others that you've known within the workplace, and maybe even how some have gotten past that?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot.
I know I
That
started,
will be a
I went
whole
right in.
episode. So it can show up in a lot of different ways. So there's I would say peer-to-peer trauma. There's the systemic trauma that can happen within a workplace. What I have come into contact the most with is probably systemic, where you are working in a toxic work culture, or there are issues with discrimination, racism, sexism, ageism. That's a big one that I hear a lot recently.
Right.
And when that shows up, I think the hardest part about trauma in the workplace is what is like part of like par for the course of like work is not always going to be enjoyable, or work is not always going to be something that you love, versus like it is really having a negative impact, and it's causing like deleterious like effects on my body.
Right.
And so I've seen this where some clients have developed something like insomnia, where they've never had insomnia before, and now all of a sudden like this is a disorder, or they're getting sick every year. Those are the ways that for me, when I think about trauma in the workplace, where I'm like, what else is going on? So if you've gone to the doctor, you've gone to your nutritionist, or you've gone to your whoever your professionals are, and it's still coming up, maybe there's something more here. And I think when we get to trauma, and this is, like I said, this is a really big field. So I'm going to try to throw it all in at once in this catch all, and then we can kind of tease it out.
Right.
Um, is, there's trauma when we think of PTSD, trauma of like there actually being fear for your life, versus
Right.
trauma in the way that like it is having such an adverse impact that I am no longer thriving in my life. And I think that is where we really see it happening within the workplace and in the work culture. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that truly affects a woman's ability to lead, whether you're a woman of color or not. That having that traumatic workplace in places where there just isn't any psychological safety makes it difficult to perform your best at work and at home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the other part that comes is that you start to feel disconnected, right? Because one of the things what happens when we like are experiencing trauma is like we go into this fight or flight response, and we want to protect. I always say like, it's about how we learn to protect and survive in our environments and in our world. And oftentimes to protect, it either means we're pushing people away because we're trying to like defend against something, or we're isolating, right? That like now I no
Mm,
longer I don't want to like call friends. I don't want to call family. I don't want to do the exact things that help me ground in and get through those difficult situations. Instead, I start hunkering down because I'm also trying to reserve my energy so I can gear up for what I'm about to go back into.
Right, right. So you have this depleted energy. You aren't able to access, like you said, people around you personally that you would look to for support. And I would guess that it would also translate to collaborating on teams or finding some solace in that one workplace have.
Yeah. So, I'll use a little bit of my own story. And this wasn't exactly in work, but I was in grad school. This is when I was working on my doctorate. And I was I was dealing with some trauma there. And the
Mm,
way that it presented, right, when I was in the spaces where I was working in groups or I was having to get feedback, is I got the wonderful feedback of, you're being a little hostile. You're being really
ah,
argumentative without recognizing that I was having a trauma response. And so, when I would sit in a room where it's like, it's a vulnerable space sometimes to share ideas or to get feedback from whether it's your manager, leadership, whoever it may be. And when
peers.
you're coming from this place, peers, right? Of sitting in this sort of like trauma lens or trauma filter, your body doesn't know how to discern that from actual danger. So I think the
Actually,
big thing that actually shows up is that, I get something that may even be really helpful feedback. And instead, my entire body goes, danger, danger, you're being attacked. And
right.
so I shut down. I can't take in any of that data. I can't like actually integrate it into what I'm doing. And instead, I either push back, in which we're called defensive. I often hear this when it's like, well, you can't take constructive criticism, or
Mm,
you aren't teachable, right? You aren't coachable.
wow.
And that oftentimes when it's like a pattern of that, I usually will have clients like slow down because I'm very embodied, right? And I'm like,
Hmm.
feel into your body. What is happening right in this moment?
Right.
And for me, right, in my story was like, I was like, it feels like literally my whole body is under attack and is like, no.
Right.
And it wasn't that I didn't want to hear the feedback, but it felt so dangerous in that moment
Right.
that I
Right.
couldn't hear the feedback.
So you really use your body, you checked into your body, saw what was happening, what messages that your body is telling you,
Hmm.
and then tried to translate. Does this translate into reality? Is this actually the reality? Am I in danger? To sort of be
Yeah.
your check and balance upon your reality.
And well, and that's where the hard part is, right? Because if you're in a place where it is dangerous, right? Like, and
Mhm.
there are parts of, for like in my program, there were parts where it wasn't safe. It wasn't emotionally safe.
Right.
And when I actually did this, I did this. I had a wonderful supervisor who I was working with who pointed it out very, very, very nicely. Was like, I don't always know that you're listening. That sometimes it feels like I'm trying to like just teach you or tell you something, and the message isn't getting through. But then you go to your office, and 2 hours later, you'll come and ask me a question, and I'm like, oh, okay, she's got it. And she's like, but I'm wondering what that would be like if we could do that real time, right? If you
Mm,
did need that time to go away. And so a lot of this I initially like learned with her,
okay.
and learning like what's happening in your body right now. Like as soon as like, and she could see it where it's like I would tense up, and what happens is if you don't know that you're tensing, right, then you don't know that you're going into this fight or flight response. And so when we started going through it, the way that I learned was that like checking in with my body and then ask myself, is this actually a safe space? And I think this is really important because it's not always that the answer is yes, right? Like
Mm,
just because it's not physical danger doesn't mean that we're not in danger. And so once I'm able to say like, oh, you know what, this isn't going to be an emotionally safe place, then the thing is what do I have at my at my disposal, right? What can I use? That might be that, you know what, this is a place that really isn't wanting my feet, like my input. They're not really wanting my thoughts. And so I might just realize the safest thing is just for me to say yes. That and this is not a place for us to really have a discourse, right? Of like different ideas and different thoughts. That there are workplaces like that where they just really
Right.
want you to say yes. And so
Yes,
what is that like when I notice that, right? um,
exactly. And let's pause for a moment for a quick commercial and we'll come right back.
all
What's
right.
up? It's Brian Randolph, host of Keeping It Real with Randy Boy. You can catch me every Saturday morning at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time on Vitality TV, right here on E360 TV. Check me out, Randy Boy.
Welcome back. So when we left, we were talking about when workplaces just want you to say yes. They don't want you for your talent, your knowledge, and your skills and everything you bring to the table. You are supposed to agree, and you get that message pretty clearly. Then what do you do?
So when you get the message and you're like, okay, I'm just supposed to agree, is if this is, and this is where it comes to like that really deeper work of like, is this where I'm supposed to be? And
Hmm.
I think this is where ultimately like where I love and where my work is learning how to create a life that is most customized and tailored to your needs. So if I recognize that I'm in a place where they only want me to say yes, and if I say anything else, that is going to be emotionally dangerous for me. Then the next question is that the environment I want to be in?
Right. And what price, as you said, what price are you paying? And can I afford and do I want to silence myself in these ways?
Exactly. What is the ultimate cost, right? Because I can do it today, but what about
Hmm.
tomorrow? What about next week? What about a year from now? And what
Right.
does that do to myself and my sense of worth and my sense of contribution, my sense of, competency? Like what happens as I go smaller and smaller and smaller to maintain my safety?
Exactly, because each time that you say yes to them instead of saying yes to yourself and your ideas, you are agreeing to your subjugation. You are agreeing to being something other than you.
Yeah. And I think the hardest part is that you start to feel like I have to. You at some point you stop recognizing that it's a choice, right? That
Mhm.
that here's this fork in the road. I could talk, but then that equates to pain or being targeted or being criticized, or I could be silent and yes, I get by. It's less taxing. The bandwidth
Right,
that's required is lower, but that ultimate cost may be so much higher.
right, right. And talk about that ultimate cost a little bit more.
This is one of those where it's interesting because I work with as young as college students, and I see the fear of like, what am I supposed to do? What is my life supposed to be? Where am I supposed to go? And
Mhm.
I'm like, this is the perfect time. And I love those questions. And how amazing is it to learn to fill in your body then? Because the other side of that is then when I get to my like 30s, 40s, 50s sometimes, and it's like, I just realized like I haven't lived.
Mm,
Like I'm alive, but I'm not living.
right.
I don't know the last time I actually felt excited about my life. I don't even know who I am.
Right.
And I spend so much time at my job. I spend so much time in my career, and it's just a shell.
And I can't tell you how many women that I see in my age group, especially the Gen Xers, who are really rediscovering who they are in breaking some of those chains that they've been bound to. And sometimes when I see them and they come to me, they've forgotten who
Mhm.
they are. And they're on a journey of rediscovering exactly what they want and who they are. So many times they said, I don't know what I want.
Yeah. Well, and here's the funny thing is you can't be who you used to be. Like, if I tried to go back to be like the 6-year-old me, I'd be like, I do not like the same TV shows. I do not like the same food. I don't like the same activities for fun. And
Right.
so, like, and we think that when we get to being an adult, and there's this weird thing of like you just arrive, like you land, and that's it. And it's like,
Hmm.
no, 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 no. This is forever an evolving process.
Right.
But what happens when you've missed the last like 10, 15, 20 years of those evolutions?
Hmm.
There's so many things that it's like that, like, there's this wonderful book called The Compound Effect.
The compound effect. Okay.
The Compound Effect, yeah. And it's about how to make change in life, right? And what
Mhm.
the premise of the book is that it is not about like the big change, the big like glamorized, like, earth.
I'm gonna do it all.
Yeah. It is really that like the smallest feasible change.
Right.
And so they say like for like I'll use like to put this in a way that it can be understood really easily is like say you want to train for a marathon and you've done nothing before. And so the first thing may be is like, can you walk to the end of your block? That would be the smallest feasible change.
Right.
And then you add 1% on top of that, right? So then it's like, can you walk around the corner, right?
Hmm.
And then you do that. And then it's like, can you walk to the end of the neighborhood? And then you do that. And it ends up being like this place of like, it's slowly creating this significant difference that becomes that marathon.
Right.
But it's
Right.
not that you go from like A to like L to Z. It's just A to B.
So you make the small, incremental, sustainable changes because it's easy to do that. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I just had a situation at the beginning of this week that encapsulate that experience. So my daughter and I are like, okay, we need to quit eating out so much and we need to eat at home a lot more. And she was like, okay, mommy, no eating out for a month. And I was like, okay, look, I can't promise a month. Let me start with a week. Let me get through
Yeah.
this week. and
Right?
and then we'll go to the next week. And she's just like, ah. And I was like,
Right?
I know me. Let me start with a
See?
small goal.
I would even go smaller than that, right? I would say, okay,
Let me get
we
through the
go
day.
out to eat. No, we go out to eat and maybe I won't get, an appetizer or I won't get a drink,
Mm,
right? That may be the smallest one. It may not be that even going out, but like, could I order like something less, right? Take something
right.
off the menu.
Right.
Or could I say that why don't we order uh order once a week, right? And I go by the amount of times we're going, right? And so
Right.
we'll just go for an appetizer, right? And so I'm not even taking going out to eat off. I take a portion of what I'm doing in my out to eat off, right?
Right.
So if I go out, like, so I love to go out to eat. But when I go out to eat,
No
yeah,
dishes, right?
no dishes, but also I just like it feels like a treat. So I'm like, okay, we are doing appetizers, we're doing salads, we're doing the main course, we're doing desserts. Don't forget about the drinks. And it's like it becomes this whole entire production that's like, this is amazing. And it's like so
So
if
it's
I'm gonna
very experiential for you.
yeah. Yeah. And so like if I wanted to do something where it's like, oh, I'm doing this too much is maybe I can't even get to the like not going out to eat, but maybe I take that dining experience and I par that down, right? And then I par it down again. And then I take like a full day off, right? And slowly doing that where it's like, okay, well, now I'm going to do this here at home, right? So maybe we do the appetizers at home and we do the meal out, or we do the meal out or meal at home and we do dessert out, you know?
So what I hear you saying is that when we think about emerging women leaders and women, senior women leaders, that you don't have to take on the whole system. Yes, the system may be jacked up, but what small incremental change can you make in your behavior to begin to erode those dynamics? Is that?
Yeah. So if we're going back to this place of trauma, right? Is that like at first it is like, do I recognize it? Right? Because we can't do anything that we don't recognize. Right.
Absolutely.
That's that awareness is where the starting place always is for me. So the first one is like, do I recognize?
Yes.
Do I recognize what is happening in my day? You know, in these moments, is it in a meeting? Is it with a certain coworker? Is it with the system? You know, so like there.
Right.
So I think that's the first thing is like, what am I aware of? And once I become aware of, is what's one thing that I need to feel better, right? That's the low hanging fruit. Is first awareness is like, what am I aware of? What is making me feel uncomfortable at work? And what is one thing, just the smallest thing? Is it that I first would need support? Do I have a mentor that I can go to? Do I have a colleague I can go to? Is that the one thing I need? Or is it that the one thing I need is I need to set a boundary here, right? That maybe this is a matter of I feel taken advantage of. I'm always getting the extra work. I'm always having that, oh, you got done early here. Let me just stack some more on.
Yes.
Right?
The favorite punishment.
Right?
You do so well.
So let me give you more. But so maybe I hold myself to like, you know what? I'm going to set that boundary where it's like, this is what I was tasked to do. And this is where I need to stop. Right. And I recognize my own worth to say that, like, you know what, like if I'm doing a good job, if I am holding my own, like believe me, they don't want to get rid of you. They don't, that is a fear that they want to get rid of you. And so if you're doing well, is like that, here's my boundary, because here's the other part. If somebody's not going to appreciate boundaries, that's not a safe place to be. Right.
So you're saying test that out. And if you find that you are penalized for boundaries that you need to feel safe, then you may need to look elsewhere.
Right. Because if I'm in a place where it's like, okay, I'm already not feeling good. And then here's a boundary that I need so that I can feel good, so I can show up and do my best work and be the best, leader I need to be, manager I need to be, employee I need to be, employer I need to be, right? Because there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there. Right. Is that if I am doing my best work and I need this to do my best work and I get penalized for that, like, what does that say about how I'm valued as a person? Right. And what does that mean if I have to ignore these very fundamental parts of me for the job?
Wow. Now, I'm like, I want to ask a loaded question. May I ask a loaded question?
Oh, absolutely. I love them.
So I absolutely love boundaries, limits, parameters. And what history or what things could there be in a person's life that would make them more susceptible to being fearful or not wanting to set boundaries? Boom.
I mean that is the question, right? We learn to accept things that feel familiar to us. I always say, like, people don't go towards stability. They don't go towards health. They go towards homeostasis. And so if
I
this is
love that. Say that again. Say that again.
people do not go towards stability or health, they go towards homeostasis. People
You're
go
absolutely right.
towards what they know, right? I mean, don't
Yes.
like that like
Yes. I've never heard that
this
said
feels
that
familiar.
clearly and succinctly.
You know what, like when you I think one of the things when you're working through trauma and there's like so much shame attached with it, like this is me, this is what I'm doing wrong, without recognizing like what you're doing is you're looking for the familiar.
Right.
You're looking for what you know because that feels like home. And home is not a matter of what's cuddly or not, but I know this terrain. Have you
That's
ever
right.
gone a place where you're like, I know this? And even if there could be cliffs and valleys, but you're like, I know where that pothole is, I know where that cliff is.
Better
And
the
your
devil you know
body,
than the one you don't.
right, your body settles. Your body settles in a way that it doesn't in the unfamiliar. And
Mm.
so if the familiar is that I'm people pleasing, if the familiar is that people take advantage of me, if the familiar is that I just ignore my needs,
Yes.
even if like the impact is against you, there's a part of you that's like, but I know this. This and we confuse what I know for what feels good.
Mm. Right. Because
Right?
let's admit though, let's admit that there's a certain goodness in understanding what you're dealing with, even if it's totally fucked up.
Yeah.
You
Oh yeah. Oh
understand it.
no. Use the color word. Like, believe me, those pop out of my mouth all the time. But no, you're so right, because like here, when you're going from that place, there's a sense of control, right? Like I have control,
Even though you don't.
right? Even though you don't, it feels like I have control. Like I can I this is again like this is my turf,
Right.
and that turf just the weights get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you get weighed down more and more and more. And the idea of doing something else, it's like, so the other one, Malcolm Gladwell wrote like a book, right? Called, I don't know if you're familiar with it, it's called Blink. And it's talking about like how we make decisions so fast. Like that is part of what allows us to be amazing as species, right? It's like we can do a split second decision quickly, right? We look at somebody, we size them up, we go to a place, we say whether it's safe or not. We're always constantly figuring out how do I simplify this. I mean, that's where we're at right now in the world is
Right.
we are on simplify overload, but won't go into that too deep. But we simplify everything. And so the one thing that you do when you're in this space is that I can simplify. I don't have to actually intentionally be present. I don't need to be aware. I don't need to do the hard, heavy lifting of this entire like formula, because I can just do a plug and play.
Right.
I know what
You
this
got the
is.
easy button.
Plug. Right. The easy button. Right. And what it would take to set those boundaries, what it would take to do something different than what you are used to, what is home, what is familiar, is now I have to do the work. Now I have to do that every step of like, okay, A, this right here. B, now check your nervous system. C, what do you notice in your environment? D, and it's that clunky, right? It is that clunky. I'm a mom, and I remember like when I'm teaching like my son to read, and it's like, oh wait, first I have to teach you the letters, and then we have to make sure you distinguish the letters, and then we have to learn what each letter sounds like, and then we have to put the letters together, and then we have to put letters with two syllables. And I'm like, how did I learn to read? Like,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then when you're a stubborn reader, I remember my husband was trying to teach my daughter the word the, right? THE. And she was getting so angry with him because she's like, he doesn't even know how to read. It's to he.
Right, because it doesn't follow the rules. Right? Like, I know these rules.
She
That
knew
is
what she knew.
exactly. Yeah, but that's exactly it. No, just think about that exact example. That is what we are doing in our jobs. That is what we are doing in our lives. Is we are like, we have gotten the wrong. We have the very basic, clunky, whatever rules, and we're like, no, that's wrong. It's tahi. And versus like, no, there's a thee out there. But like, what do you have to do to allow yourself to learn the thee?
To get there.
Right? And
Let's
think about
take a
that
break right here.
frustration.
We're going to take a break and we'll come right back.
Hi everyone, I'm Andy.
And I'm Minna.
We're the hosts of Chronically Healthy Life.
Join us Fridays at 7 p.m. Central Time on Vitality TV to see how we flip the idea of chronic on its head and create chronic health in our bodies, minds, finances, and relationships, right here on E360 TV.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
So let's get back to making those shifts and those boundaries at work and how difficult it is. I'd love for you to share some tips about that.
Yeah. So when we get back into like our awareness, right? And this one is where that's like, it really is helpful to have a guide, to have a mentor, to have either whether it's colleagues, whether it's friends, like, but somebody who like ends up helping you like build that awareness, like, because I really think what we're talking about awareness is like, do you have a really good like reflection of yourself? And so if you don't have a good mirror, you need to find a mirror. So first find yourself a mirror of somebody who can be like, yeah, you come, whether it's your partner and you're like, yeah, you come home wound up, and it's always on Wednesday and Friday, right? Or or maybe it's a colleague at work who's like, I always notice that you're a little bit more reserved, a little bit more quiet after this meeting. Or a friend who's like, you know what, you always talk about this one person, this one manager. This one manager is the person who you just like every single time there's something going on. I don't know if you realize that. So getting your mirror first, right? And then, right, once you have your mirror, like it's starting, I always do, I think everything should be embodied. And so that is tracking your body. And so I have my mirror, so I start to get like, okay, maybe every Wednesday, I'm ready to go. I'm like, I am just on fire. Don't talk to me. Don't say the wrong thing. Don't cut me off on the road.
Yes,
And
that part.
yeah, like all of the things that show us that something's going on. And so once I have that, then I really start to think of like, can I track my body what this feels like? Right? Does it feel like I'm in danger? Does it feel like I'm in trouble? Does it feel like I'm incompetent? Because this also looks different per person. And so I think it's really important to know that like when you're going through something at work, it may be something, it may be that like, I feel like an idiot. In this space, I feel like an idiot, which is very different than I feel like I'm in danger. That if I speak up, I'm going to get punished. There's going to be this consequence. So once I have that part, right, the second part, then it's like, is it true? So for me, the way I did it was, this is a supervisor who's helping me, who didn't actually punish me. No. So it feels that way. And that's how we know there's some maybe some personal stuff we need to work on, right?
Right. Because our feelings aren't facts.
Right. If I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling like an idiot. And it's like, but I'm only getting like, oh my God, you've done an amazing job. Like your work is flawless. It's like, okay, that's outside of the work, right? That's outside of the job. But if I'm sitting in the job and it's like, oh no, it is actually happening, right? That's where we get to that, like the low hanging fruit. What's the one thing that I can do? What's the one boundary that I can set? And I attempt to set it. And I think the big thing with boundaries is consistency, is that you start really small and you stay really consistent. So if the boundary is I'm going to require that if you need me to do something for you, I need you to write it down. That way I don't have to go track this piece, that piece, and that piece because you told me on the fly and your day is much better. But now it's on a pile of things that I need to do and I don't have all the pieces. So my boundary might be is like, hey, if you're going to ask me for this favor, I need to put in a pretty little package so that I can attend to it, right? That maybe I'm too afraid to say, no, I don't want to attend to it yet, but I need it in a package that makes it much more palatable for me, right? Makes it much more feasible for me to get to without adding too much stress onto my plate. Right. So if that's the boundary, right? And I stay consistent with it. And here's the thing, if people are not going to respect my boundaries, you're going to learn very, very soon. You will learn very quickly if you're in a place that does not respect boundaries. And that leads to the next thing is like, then what does that mean that I'm at a place where I'm not allowed to have boundaries?
Right.
Like, is that worth it? And
so you have to make hard choices about what do you sacrifice? My well-being, right? Or this comfortable job, this comfortable salary.
Yeah. Well, and see, this is where I go a little rogue, where, that may feel like a good choice for you, right? Maybe you realize like this is going to be the place where I don't love it, but you know what? I get to go travel here, and here, and I fill myself back up, and that's balance for me, right? That I am a huge proponent of you get to decide what balance looks like. I don't get to tell you. And so if you know that like this is a job without boundaries, but I get this and that is worth it, and I feel empowered because now I know I've looked through it. I'm totally aware. I know the price and I'm okay to pay it. Hey, you go pay that.
Okay. So like, hey, I want Louboutins. I don't care.
Right. Right. Like, so right. Because there'll be some people who like, whoa, wait. But no, now that you know about the shoe, you don't. And it's like, no, I still want them. I don't care. They may hurt my feet. I may not be able to walk for 2 days after wearing them. But I want them tonight. And it's like, okay, cool. Right. Then you do it and you celebrate it. You celebrate like, yeah, I know I'm dealing with in this job. And then the thing I would say is that if you're choosing to keep it is, then how do you armor up?
I absolutely love this because it can release so much guilt and shame about making that choice. When you see your colleagues leaving, like, girl, you still there taking that? Why are you there? They don't respect you. But if you've consciously made that choice, and I think that's a distinguishing factor, whether you're suffering in silence and beating yourself up and feeling shame and regret, or whether you decide, no, I know what this is and I'm okay with it because I get to do that. I love that cost benefit analysis.
I love customization. Like I always, that is the thing I will say is like, you have to learn how to customize your life. You have to learn how to tailor it to fit you. And so if you say like, I know this, I'm fully aware and I want to stay because I get something else that works even better. Maybe I have a kid who's really, really sick. Right. And it's like those benefits I want and need to be there because it gives me this, right? It gives me access to this. That is real, right? And if I'm sitting here like, oh, I just, I have to feel horrible because I'm staying here. Like that's good. That is going to bury you alive.
Wow.
Right. And so if I know what I'm doing, if I'm going in with sober eyes, then the question is how do you armor up? Right? How do
Okay.
I
Tell me how to
create
put on
this?
the full armor. Tell me. Are we
Right?
going biblical here? We gonna armor up?
I mean, I tell people, I'm like, you gotta learn, you gotta, because we all choose our battles. We do.
Yes.
We all choose our battles, right? But if you're like, no, right? If you do this whole process, right? You got the mirror, you've become aware, you know what is happening. You know that it's not from outside, right? Because like I said, it could be our stuff from the past coming in. But if it's from like in this space, in this environment, and you're like, actually, no, I don't want to do that. That is not worth the cost. That is not worth my time. That is not worth my life energy, right? Like that is when it's like, then what's the next step, right? What's the smallest step forward?
Right.
Maybe that is, I'm going to start learning about what other careers are out there. Maybe it's, I'm going to start thinking about other things that excite me. Maybe that's, I'm just going to expose myself. That again, it doesn't need to be this massive change, but it's just, I'm going to make one step towards the change that I want to go towards.
So you would be an anti-leap person. So he's like, no, you need to know where you're leaping to. Just don't.
I think we can leap, right? But the thing is like, I think there are times for leaps, and if you, I watch a lot of like action movies and stuff.
Me too.
Those leaps are coming when it's a difference between life and death. Right?
Okay.
Oftentimes those leaps are like, I can't anymore. And I think there's definitely, if you get to this point, you're like, I can't do another day at this job, then absolutely, I think you should take the leap. But if you're like, I'm just waking up, because I think this is the part where, again, invention of microwaves. I don't know why we got them, but they make that food cook so fast. You're like, I just want it now. But that's not how life works, right? Like there's so many things we typically have to what is the word I'm trying to think? Dismantle, right? There's so many fears. There's so many like obstacles that we have created in our own head that we have to break apart. And if we just go towards leaping, it is very easy to end in paralysis.
Yeah, because
and that is not forward. Like, right? Like
we get into freeze.
Exactly. Because we've gone into a space where it's like, I don't have the tools. I don't have a compass. I don't have a guide. And now I'm just like, and it can be so much turmoil. Right. So I am a person who's like, there is a place for a leap. If I see that train coming, yeah, I'm gonna leap. Right? If there's a place of like, I'm waking up and I'm just like, oh man. And right there's a matter of shell. There's a little bit of shell shock that can happen of like, I do need something different. I don't know where to start. I really think honoring that and honoring the time it takes for that to marinate and cook is really important. And to me, it's about the actual movement, not the speed.
Okay. The movement, not this, just having some forward momentum. Now, I'd love for the audience to hear about some of the ways that you offer, because I know you have a retreat coming up, and I'm sure that must often offer the opportunity for them to ignite anew.
Absolutely. It is Ignite Anew, women's retreat. So, the retreat I have coming up, it's in September. It's for women. And it really is about that. Like,
no, we're saying September 2023 because we don't know when people are going to watch it. Okay.
Yes, September 2023. That it is an opportunity to really like shut out the noise. And I think just transformational things happen when you're in a group of like-minded individuals. And so to imagine being in a group of women who have been investing in their growth and in their wellness and are ready to take this deeper dive into actually knowing what their true voice is, what that sounds like, how to own your own story, right? A big part of what's weaved into our conversation today is you have to know you. You can't make decisions if you don't know yourself. And you can't know yourself if you do not get to make space to meet her. And so,
Right. The new her.
Right? Because we don't go back. We can't go backwards. This is not Benjamin Button. And
Earl,
so,
it took me so long to get rid of my my workout outfit from when I was in the Marine Corps. And I was like, okay, this fits on my arm.
Right? Like you gotta shed it. You gotta shed it to evolve. You cannot evolve, you cannot transform if you do not shed the old. Like you got to let that go. And so this is really about owning your story, digging deep and really understanding who you are, learning how to like connect to your body. So I use the senses and some of the activities so you can know like, what is it like when I connect to taste? What is it like when I connect to touch? What's it like when I connect to sound? And really understanding yourself from a whole perspective, so that you can make the next customized decision in your life. Like I want you to leave ignited and able to tailor your life for your needs.
That is so amazing. You don't realize the synergy that we have. Is one of the things that I give to my clients is I encourage them to develop a comfort kit during times of distress. And that comfort kit is based upon the five senses, and having that readily available in these spaces where you're either not psychologically safe or you feel like you might experience some amount of distress, and being able to access that immediately is important. So I love that.
It keeps you grounded, it keeps you anchored, it keeps you connected to you. Right? So one of my favorite things, and I've just recently started doing it more and more, is writing a love letter to yourself. So whether you come to this retreat or not, if you are listening, my homework, so I love giving homework, I am a therapist, is write a love letter to yourself. Write a love letter. Like you can put it right on your nightstand, and this isn't journaling. But this is when you first wake up, and it just starts with something like, "Hey, gorgeous, I love you. I know that you are putting in your best effort. And you know what? I see you. And I am so amazed at how much effort that you continue to give, and you do not give up. And I just want to say I love you."
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, can we play a little Mary J. Blige, Good Morning Gorgeous in the background?
Oh, absolutely. Even better. Like, do a whole anthem. Like, and write it every morning. Write it every morning, because you will see a change. If you write yourself a love letter every morning, you will see a change.
Oh, that is so beautiful. A love letter to remind yourself. Because when we go out in the world, people aren't necessarily giving us love every time we walk into a room. And being able to start your day off with that, I can absolutely see how loving and tender that is to carry you throughout some difficult moments.
Absolutely. And when you feel loved, right? When you start your day feeling loved and being told that you are loved, right? Because everybody's like, I want to be loved by someone. Well, guess what? This is a someone. I'm a person too, right?
That's right.
So when you start your day feeling loved, the decisions you make change. The boundaries that you set change. The respect you require change. There is something to walk around in this world feeling loved. You walk taller, you walk bolder, you live truer.
Absolutely. Oh, that was definitely a sermon. So I mean, really, it is. It sets the framework for as a reminder for yourself, as well as how you show up in the world and what you can expect and what you will accept in your environment and from others. Once you love yourself, you're unlimitless.
Yeah, you are like I mean, I can say like both personally and professionally, when you love yourself, the entire world changes.
You have provided so much insight for us today, and I love all of the tips and the strategies to to allowing women to be able to check into their bodies to understand what's happening, whether or not they feel psychologically safe, sharing some of the things about how they may be more susceptible to trauma, as well as giving them grace to be able to accept places that may not be as friendly because they've defined what their cost benefit analysis is. Are there any last words of insight or things that you would like to share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, absolutely the love letter. That is the biggest. I believe that if you do that, that to me is the biggest thank you that I could ever receive from anyone is learning to love themselves. But I have a podcast that's called Shit They Didn't Tell Us that I co-host with my best friend. Definitely more off the cuff, but we talk about everything from relationships to career, money, just the shit we didn't learn as kids that we're figuring out as adults. And love you to check it out. It's at anywhere you get your podcast. But mostly, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share the space. Thank you for this conversation. I have truly appreciated it. So it's been fun.
Thank you very much, and we'll catch up with you soon. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into this episode of Leadership Beyond Burnout. I'm sure you've gotten some tips and some nuggets to help you to be able to lead beyond burnout. Until next time, we will see you Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Vitality Network with E360 TV.